Welcome to our town hall on the Rappahannock River water intake project. The county's been working on this a long time. I've been here almost 12 years, and we started working on it about 11 years ago to restart what had been started in the early 2000s or late 90s. So it's not a new project. It's one that the county spent millions of dollars on, doing all of the various studies to bring water to the county for the future. We don't need the water right now. We don't need the water next year or the next 5 years. But sometime in the future, the county's going to need some more water than deep wells and bedrock. And most of the wells on this side are in groundwater management. We won't be getting any more water out of the groundwater management area, I don't think. So with that, I will introduce Mr. Joey Schiebel. He's the Director of Public Works and Public Utilities, and he's been spearheading this project for a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Cully. Good evening. Did everybody get a copy of the agenda? Just making sure, because there is some other detailed information in there if you need one. You'll take one. Chris, could you hand a few more out? Got one up here. Anybody else need a copy? Got one more. All right, everybody's got a copy? All right, I'll go ahead and get going. Again, my name's Joey Schiebel. I am the Director of Caroline County's Public Utilities Department, Public Works. I've been with the county just over 30 years now, and this has consumed a lot of time over my career. Some people are saying this just started in the last couple years, and as we go through this presentation, you'll see that we've been looking at the county's long-term water solution. And part of this is looking at the midterm solution and long-term. So we know as a county, as we continue to grow, we're going to need water. And as we go through here, we'll see the different amounts and things that we've looked at over the years of trying to figure out how we're going to get our long-term solution. So I would say that this is probably one of the top 3 issues that the Board of Supervisors has been dealing with for the past 10 to 15 years is really where are we going to get our water from Caroline County. So today we hope to answer these questions for you is what is the groundwater management area? How much water do we need? What is the water supply project? What are the effects on the river? And what are the next steps? So the first one is, what is the groundwater management area? DEQ was supposed to have been here tonight. They had a press release that they were trying to get through the press release department there to review everything. And I got a phone call on Thursday saying that they would not be able to attend because they were tied up with the General Assembly and weren't able to get that approved. So they told us we weren't coming. So we've got some slides that we have used from DEQ that some of them we've given them credit on those. And essentially what they are slides that they presented to the Board of Supervisors as well as to the town of Bowling Green. So we'll go through and kind of talk about what that is. So the Eastern Groundwater Management Area was established in 1992, and it started because on the eastern shore, they noticed that there was a degradation in water quality and quantity. And as that went on, that did expand into the Eastern Virginia, which essentially is the I-95 corridor. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see Caroline County. Everything that's in that dark blue color is in the groundwater management area. Everything that is west of that's in bedrock. That's not that's not part of that area. So right now, Caroline has quite a few wells that are not in the groundwater management area. The problem is that the water quality in deep wells in bedrock, you end up extracting all the minerals as you're using that water. So we get a lot of irons and manganese and chlorides. So water quality and then as well as quantity, all that comes into bedrock. You know, we're basically trying to pull water that's located within the small fractures within the bedrock. But in the groundwater management area, you'll see the sediment overlay areas, and you'll see the aquifer and then the different layers that the water sets in. So as we're drilling wells and looking for water in the groundwater management area, we're trying to hit these pockets of water. So one of the things that the state has noticed is groundwater subsidence. And what that means is the water that is retained within the soil area is being drawn out and going towards the eastern shore. Unfortunately, Caroline is the one that's feeling the most pain because we are right along the bedrock area, and that's the first area that starts seeing the degradation when they're drawing the water 120 miles away. So as the water continues to go towards Virginia Beach and Norfolk and those areas, they're actually pulling it all the way through all the localities, including Caroline County. So as we're trying to drill wells in here, it's making it harder and harder to do that. DEQ has shown on the graph over here, if you look, it actually shows the degradation of the groundwater level actually dropping over time, and that's what that's depicting there. So DEQ says that the regulation was put in place to preserve future supplies for all Virginians throughout sustainable management and resources. And since that's been enacted, there's actually starting to see some of the groundwater coming back into these areas, which is good. So it's not quite to Caroline, we still got a ways to go, but it is starting to come back. One of the fears is it's kind of like a sponge. If you take a sponge, and as the soil holds that water, and if you actually squish that out and it dries out, the sponge stays the same. You kind of got to work that. Well, once the ground is settled, there's no way to get it to come back up. So subsidence, where the ground level actually starts to subside and actually starts to compress the areas that groundwater is in. So that's what we're trying to protect is the groundwater and stop land subsidence. I'm sorry, I actually can see two screens and you couldn't see the one. So now it makes more sense what you're saying. So on the right-hand side is the dark blue on Caroline County, and you can see where we're located. So the dark blue is the groundwater management area. The graph to the left that you're seeing is actually the decline in groundwater. And as you see, it starts from 1987 and goes through 2024. So there's quite a bit of a drop that you can see over that period of time. So as we're looking at groundwater and we look at the area of impact, as you see, there's a cone that has developed when you're drawing from the middle well, what they call the facility well on this diagram. And what that does is it creates a cone of influence. So anytime that you're drawing water from a well, whether it's a home well or a well like the county has, it could be 50, 100 gallons a minute, it ends up creating this cone of influence. That cone of influence can go out a couple hundred feet for a small well that's not drawing much, up to miles if you're drawing a lot of water. Well, what happens is that one well actually starts impacting neighboring wells. So a well that you've got here could impact your neighbor. So if you start running low on water and don't have water, your neighbor does, it could be over time they're not going to have water as well. So we know that with the groundwater subsidence and the groundwater levels, continuing to drill wells affects a lot of people. So the groundwater area of impact, what this is to show is the simulated drawdown of the Potomac aquifer. So that's the aquifer that DEQ says that we need to be in Caroline County, that we're allowed to withdraw any water out of. And there's actually a maximum radius that they use for that impact. And as you can see, this map actually in the blue in the center is actually the town of Bowling Green. But just outside of that is the area of concern, or as they designate the Potomac aquifer critical cell. What that means is that any time that a new well is to be drilled, you have to have, DEQ has to run a model. And if our model shows that by that withdrawal that it touches anywhere in that critical cell, they will not allow you to draw water. So the town of Bowling Green, this is actually from their slide when it was done. When the town of Bowling Green was looking, DEQ said to the town of Bowling Green, if you drill another well, we're concerned that we can't permit it because you're close enough to be impacted by this critical cell. So knowing that our poorhouse wells, which is the high school system, is even closer to this critical cell, and anything that's east of 95 around the Carmel Church area is really close to that one critical cell. So those areas are really of a concern, knowing that we're really going to be limiting on how much groundwater we can actually withdraw. So that's kind of the groundwater management as a whole. DEQ explained that is trying to preserve the groundwater for future generations, knowing that we're not able to continue to drill wells in these areas. We have a limited amount of water that could be drilled because of that critical cell area, and that Caroline County is really going to have to focus on other mid to long-term water supply needs. This now gets us to question number 2 of how much water do we need? So Caroline County's existing groundwater system, we've got 3 systems. We've got the Ladysmith area, the Carmel Church area, and then we have the poorhouse area in here. poorhouse / high school. And then we've also included the town of Bowling Green, which is one of our local partners. So the groundwater wells, right now we have 15 wells, and we have 1.36 million gallons a day of capacity that we can produce in our wells. We're continuing to put in additional wells to be able to meet our midterm needs, and we'll be continuing to do that as long as DEQ and the health department allow. Then next is really getting into the project itself and preparing for the increased future water needs. So community wells are needs. We've shown in our joint permit application to DEQ that through 2038, we're looking at about 7.9 million gallons a day of water, and that's our average usage. So that's what we had requested from the permit. When you actually look today in 2023, that one glass of water equals about 1 million gallons. So by 2028, we're showing we'll need somewhere around 3 million, by 2033, 6 million, and then in 38, we get up to the 7.9, right at 8 million gallons a day of water. So future water needs, the county estimates the water will be used for 44% of that will be for residential, drinking, cooking, washing, bathing, toilets, and watering. About 23 will be commercial use, so that'll be for businesses in their bathrooms, their offices, and their drinking water for restaurants and the such. And then industrial, such as manufacturing, data centers, and distribution. We've got the new Trader Joe's that's connected now. They're using about 40,000 gallons a day. We've got McKesson that's in Colma Church, another distribution facility. So they fall in there. The Blue Beacon truck wash is included in that, and facilities of that. So that's what's in that 33%. So what is the water supply project? So the project itself, the purpose is reliable long-term water supply for the community. Quality drinking water from new state-of-the-art treatment facilities and preservation of groundwater resources. So that's kind of the purpose of everything that we have been working towards. Kind of the project overview, and the purpose of the project is to provide a reliable source of water in Caroline County. The project includes a raw water intake on the Rappahannock River, the water treatment facility to be located somewhere in Colma Church, and the associated raw finished water transmission mains that will carry the water through Ladysmith Colma Church, and then projects to bring it back to the high school system and then the Milford system. And eventually, if the town of Bowling Green wished to connect it, at that time they'd be able to connect. So that consisted of us doing a joint permit application. It required us to do multiple permits as we move forward through that. The first permit we need is we need to go have a permit to withdraw from the Rappahannock River. There will be environmental permitting we have to do on the waterline project. There will be health department permits we'll need for actually designing a water treatment plant. So all those things are still going to have to come. This is kind of the first step. If you can't get a permit, it kind of kills the whole project, so there's no sense in moving forward. And then we've been working with numerous regulatory agencies over this time. DEQ and the health department are the two biggest ones. And then we've been working with the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, the Virginia Marine Resource Commission, working through them and using those for different studies and things that we've done. Excuse me. So the image that you see now is actually the timeline of this project. I've heard and read in the last couple months, that the county just started this 2-3 years ago because of data centers. And as you'll see, what we've laid out here is really over the past 20 years of everything that we've been doing to lead up to where we are today. So in 2005, we actually submitted our joint permit application. That application went through, we got a draft permit, and then we were working to meet some of the requirements of that permit, and then we had the crash in 2008 that kind of really stopped everything. Financially, the county stopped the project. I just didn't have funds to move forward. During that time, we did do a couple studies, and as you'll see, we go through here, 2016, as we move forward, we ended up finally getting our master plan updated. The consultation meeting with regulatory agencies. We had to meet with them to start things back up, saying, where are we at? What do we need to do? What have we done previously that will still be able to be used today? So we started that process, and they said that they wanted us to resubmit the joint permit application. We had several meetings with them trying to understand exactly what they wanted so that we would be able to submit to them a complete package, and spent quite a bit of time doing that. So in your hands, you should have the project milestones. There's a couple pages that kind of goes through all the different studies that we've done. I didn't really want to put them as part of this timeline, even though that is there, but those are really milestones that we hit throughout that project. And as you can see, we've been working on this project diligently for the last 10 years, but really has been something on our forefront since 2005 is really when it started the process of that. So stakeholders and community and stakeholder involvement. We did, as part of our joint permit application, we were required to have a public meeting. It was very similar to this. We had a public meeting that was required prior to us submitting our joint permit application. People came to that meeting. They spoke about the project. We had to write down all the questions and had to respond to DEQ about any of the comments that were there. So this meeting was being held because typically a permit will be issued within 277 days of issuing the joint permit application. We are now over 1,400 days since we submitted our permit. Some of that is COVID. Some of that is a lot of changeover in DEQ. So they did a review of the project and they gave us comments. We addressed those comments and went back, and then they changed in staff, and then new eyes look at it. They come up with new things. We respond to those things, and that happened over and over and over again. Truthfully, we would have had a permit by now if DEQ had stuck to their 277 days, but we are where we are. So we started hearing there were some additional concerns. We started hearing from some environmental groups, so we wanted to reach out one more time to have a meeting. Again, this isn't required part of our permitting process, but there was enough comments and questions. We thought it was important to bring this back before everybody to talk about it again, to kind of educate where we've been and how did we get where we are today. We did meet with our neighboring localities on water before we got here. We met with Hanover County, the chairman of our board, the vice chairman, county administrator, myself, a couple other staff members, went to Hanover County, and we met with our counterparts down there, and we talked about possibly getting water from Hanover. We also took the same group and we went to Spotsylvania County and sat down and spoke with them. And those conversations come out, yep, we would like to give you water, but we're competing for the same economic development purposes, and right now we can't partner with you. That then led us going to the city of Richmond, who actually contacted us and said, hey, we're interested in providing you with water. So we went down and met with the city of Richmond, who was willing to give us water and to sell water to us, and we kind of went through that, and that became pretty apparent that it was $100 million for 1 million gallons of water. So the dollars and cents didn't quite add up. At that time, this project was estimated to cost somewhere around $65–70 million for 13 million. And it, just as a side note, when we submitted our original joint permit application, it was actually for 16 million gallons a day at the max amount. So we've actually reduced that as we're going through. We're looking at our comp plan, developing our long-term plan. We couldn't justify anymore, so we backed that down to where we are. So all of our studies have been on that peak amount of 13.9, but that 7.9 is the average daily flow. So in addition to meeting with our neighboring localities, the county actually looked at the North Anna River, which is the river between Caroline and Hanover, of possibly being able to tap some of the resources off of that river. It's in the backyard of where our primary growth area is as a county. Unfortunately, Hanover County has already gotten all of the allocations that's available on that stream. So there was no way for us to do that. So then there was discussions about looking at the Mattaponi River and not actually withdrawing from the Mattaponi itself, but being able to do a collector system where we would drill wells near the Mattaponi in the Milford area, and maybe that there would be enough resurface recharge out of there that we'd be able to get some big wells. So the county invested money in a couple wells in that area. We'd already had a couple in Milford, and then we drilled 2 more. Both of them ended up being less than 50 gallons a minute. So that kind of shot that project down really quick. We were hoping for a couple hundred gallons a minute using our consultants and what they were thinking, and there was no real recharge. So at 30 gallons a minute was kind of the max amount you would be able to draw out of one of them, and the other was 40 some gallons a minute. So that turned out that that wouldn't be very good for us. We also went to AP Hill and sat down with AP Hill to talk with them because they've got a lot of wells that were drilled during the Boy Scouts Jamboree. And there's about 2 million gallons of water over there that they had permitted that they're not using. So it's like, hey, maybe there's some groundwater there. That would be a great midterm solution to kind of get us further down the road. And talking with the commander and talking with other people from DEC, that turned out that you could use it, but we can shut you off anytime we want. And that's kind of hard to do when you got 2 million gallons of water that you're providing people to be able to flush their toilets and to drink and take showers. And all of a sudden we don't have that resource anymore at any given time. And that just, there was no way that they could work around that. So that kind of became a no-go from that standpoint. We also talked to the fort about possibly bringing the water line across Fort AP Hill instead of using 301 and 17. So that was an option. We spent quite a bit of time with them. We talked with their environmental group about what that impact would look like. And during those meetings, it was kind of the same thing. If we put our water line there, they could say, you can't come on the base even to repair the water line, just depending on their readiness is what they would use the term. They said at any time that we feel that our readiness has been harmed, you may not be able to enter on the base, and that's including for an emergency repair on a water line. So that led us to the same thing. That's not the best way to go. So we started looking at how we would work around AP Hill as far as going to the river. And then recently, we've been meeting with community groups. We did meet with the Friends of the Rappahannock, the Essex County Conservation Alliance, and the Rappahannock Indian Tribe, who had sent some recent letters towards the end of last year about concerns about the project, concerns about the river, concerns about fish, and concerns about data centers. So we met with them to make sure that we could understand their concerns and where we were going from that standpoint. So those meetings were held, which kind of led us to also, trying to put more information out there so people would understand what this project is and what it was doing. So kind of a project overview. The Rappahannock River, as you see, is the intake site, the proposed site. The water, raw water pipeline that would come from down 17 across 301. And talking with AP Hill, they actually wanted the water line in the median, which was really good because there's no utilities in that median. So we were able to work that out with them. That's the projected path right now. And it goes to a Carmel Church to a proposed water treatment site. So the river intake locations and alternatives. When this project was originally looked at, some of the reasons why we looked at the Rappahannock River early on was for Haymount. So Haymount was kind of the genesis. Haymount is the #1 site that's on this map. Haymount was coming. They had already permitted for a sewer on the river, and they needed water. So there was a possible joint venture between the county and Haymount that could go on for us to look at the river. As we got looking at the river at that particular location, there ended up being a lot of issues with that location. One of them was the depth of the water. The depth of the water there is about 12, 13 feet deep. We're going to be putting an intake structure in the river that's probably, Roger, 8 feet in diameter, 6 feet, about 6 feet in diameter. So knowing that you're trying to make sure it's not sitting on the bottom, sucking up silt, and it's not up at the top where the barges that come through there could actually hit it or other vessels that are passing through. So that became a real big issue there. It's also in a flat section of stream where the water slows down a lot. So there became more issues when the water slows way down like that, of issues of the impacts in the stream itself. So another thing you'll see on here is if you look on the river itself, you'll see an area that's in red with blue hatching. Can you all see that through that image? So those images that you see are sewer discharges. So there is some issues along the river where there are sewer discharges. There is a rule that DEQ has that you cannot have a water intake within 1 mile upstream or 5 miles downstream. So everything that's in that red area and hatched came into being areas that we couldn't have an intake. So that led us to looking at #2 and then the #3 sites. The #2 was just north of Four Winds. That spot was just wasn't a very deep water and wasn't an ideal location. That really led us to the number 3 site. One of the things we were doing when we were looking at these sites, we were trying to find large acres of land that didn't have homes on them, and they were in places in the river that would work for us. So the number 3 site is in 20 feet deep water. Really good site. I'll switch to the next one. You can have more of a view there. So we're in about 20 plus feet of water in that location. That's a really good thing. We're also in a swift bend. The bend allows the water to move through. It doesn't allow sediment to go in there. It makes the water move at higher velocities. When you're talking about fish larvae and things like that, they'll move by faster than something that's really slow. We're on top of a 100-foot bluff, so you're not worried about floodplains. And on the other side of the river is a lot of wetlands that can't be built on, so it's really protected from an intake point for people building and harming that intake. So now it's in a deeper water, a better water quality. It moves us a little bit farther upstream, where it also gets us out of any kind of brackish water or salinity issues along the Rappahannock River. So when we first met with the property owner some years ago, and the property has changed hands since then, but when we met with them, one of their concerns was an eyesore in the backyard, and we came up with the idea that we could put the pump station in a barn. So as you drive by, it's going to look like a barn sitting anywhere. Most people won't even realize what's in it or anything else. So we've kind of designed this. We've got another picture that we'll show you later of kind of it split in half and what it looks like with the actual pump station inside of it. But we've designed this to be able to put the pumps down in the hole that would go 100 feet deep to be able to withdraw water from the river. It wouldn't be an eyesore, and we're looking to utilize about 2.5 acres with a buffer around that. One of the good things is the property's actually in some easements now, so nobody could build around the intake site on the Caroline side either. All right, so what are the effects of the river? Roger, is this you? It is. All right, so that kind of concludes my piece. So now we're kind of getting into the technical studies that we've done, getting into some of the design that we've done and what we've done. And I'm going to have Roger Arnold with Hazen come up. He has spent quite a bit of time on this project and is the technical guru, as we say. They've got a lot of other people that we've used for doing modeling with their group that really spent a lot of good time trying to figure out the impacts along the river. And he'll also get into the regulatory agencies and the third-party consultants that were used that came in to also look at some of these studies. So, Roger?
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about the project this evening. My name is Roger. I'm an engineer with Hazen and Sawyer in Richmond. We're an engineering firm exclusively focused on water. We've had the privilege of working with the county on the engineering and permitting aspects of this project over the last 7 years or so. So in this section, as Mr. Schiebel told you, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the work and the studies that the county has done in recent years to study and minimize the effects of this water withdrawal on the river. So you heard in the last presentation that the proposed withdrawal rate is 7.9 million gallons per day. So we wanted to put that into perspective because we don't often think about what 7.9 million gallons of water looks like. When we compare that to the volume of water that flows through the Rappahannock River past this intake location every day, that's about 1.1 billion gallons of water that flows past that intake on a daily basis, day after day on average. So when we compare that withdrawal rate of 7.9 million gallons per day to the flow rate in the river, we see that's actually less than 1% of the flow in the river. Technically 0.7% of water in the river would be withdrawn on average once the county is at a point when it needs up to 7.9 million gallons per day of water. So it's important to keep in mind this means that over 99% of water in the river that flows past the intake every day will remain in the river, will flow downstream to continue to support the environment and other uses of the water in the river. The Rappahannock River at Caroline County is a tidal freshwater river. So this means we're not so much concerned about, with reducing the water level in the river with a water withdrawal, but we need to look at how this withdrawal will affect the tidal flows in the river and the salinity levels, which, as you're well aware, refers to the amount of salts coming from the ocean and the bay back up into the river. We want to understand, would a withdrawal of water from the tidal freshwater section of the river affect salinity levels downstream at downstream locations in the Rappahannock River? So the county worked with Hazen as well as with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science to do not one but two different models to understand this important issue. And here's what they found. So the Virginia Institute of Marine Science has some of the best modelers in the country. They've done models of the many rivers connected to the Chesapeake Bay throughout Virginia. And they found, based on this study, that the differences in salinity would be very small. So I wanted to orient you to some of the figures that you see up on the screen. This is taken directly from the reports provided by the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. So to help orient you, in the lower left, you see kind of a map of the river with a few key locations just as points of reference, the intake location in green, and then the locations of Port Royal and Tappahannock. So if you then look at these results from their model over on the right-hand side with those points shown for reference, just to see where you are on the river, you can see the darker blue regions are the freshwater portions of the river with very low levels of salinity, where freshwater comes into this tidal river from Fredericksburg. And then further downstream with some of the green colors, you can see the higher levels of salinity as the river approaches the Chesapeake Bay. So on the top graph here, you can see the current salinity levels at this point in the model. And then on that the same model results with the proposed withdrawal at its maximum maximum daily rate, you can see what the salinity levels would be with that proposed withdrawal. Can you tell any difference between these two? Visually, they look very similar, and as you dig into the details, you can see why VIMS concluded that the small difference in salinity indicates that the existence of the intake will not cause significant changes in the salinity distribution, even in the period of low river discharges. So this being the conclusion from their independent modeling efforts of this project. So we wanted to share a little bit more detail, digging into this a bit further from their model. So you see first the two charts from the prior slide now moved over to the left-hand side. And because you really can't tell any visual difference in the salinity levels at that scale, on the right-hand side, we've provided directly from the VIMS reports a zoomed-in view of what the salinity changes would be. And you notice here the difference in scale. On the left-hand side, we're looking at salinity levels up to 20 parts per thousand. On the right-hand side, in order to see any difference in salinity, we need to zoom in to look at salinity differences of only 0.05 parts per thousand. So this map on the right-hand side shows the locations based on the VIMS model at which very slight differences in salinity are predicted as a result of this intake. And it gives you a sense of the magnitude of those changes. It's very, very small, only up to about 0.03 at most parts per thousand of an increase in salinity. And this map shows the locations where those salinity differences are expected to occur. Next, we want to talk a little bit more about how water will be withdrawn from the river. And this graphic on the bottom right illustrates the pump station designed as a barn that you saw previously, and how that pump station would connect to the river. There will be a pipe that goes underground from that pump station out to the river. And on the end of that pipe will be a series of screens that are designed to protect the river from any impacts during operation of the intake and during withdrawal of the water from the river. So you can see here a photo of a screen being installed very similar to this on another project. So there are two key features of these screens that we wanted to talk with you about tonight that are shown on the screen. Firstly is the very low intake velocity. It's required that these screens have an intake velocity of 0.25 feet per second. We don't often think about flows in feet per second, so If you convert that over to miles per hour, which we think about more, the average velocity through these screens would be about 0.1 miles per hour. So that's very, very slow. Put this another way, that's about the speed of a garden snail. That's how slowly water will move through this intake. And the purpose of that is to make sure that the flow rate of water into the system is very slow, very gradual, very passive, and the intake, it won't pull any aquatic life, fish, etc., into the intake as a result of this protective screen design. So second feature, these screens will have very small openings of 1 millimeter. That's about the width of a dime. And so the goal there is to make sure that fish are protected, they're not drawn into this intake, and fish eggs and larvae, which we'll talk about in a moment, will also be protected and will not be affected by the operation of this intake. So if you'd like to learn more about these screens, we actually have a couple samples of the screen material up here that you're welcome to take a look at afterwards. See if you can fit a dime through the slots on the screen. It's quite small and will go a long way to help protect the river. Next, we wanted to talk a little bit about the effects on fisheries. This is a question that we've gotten. The river is home to a number of different fish species, which are very important to the community and the health of the river and the bay. Some of those fish include shad and striped bass and sturgeon. There have been a lot of efforts by the community and statewide to help protect these fisheries, help restore the populations of these fish, which have led to some positive steps in improving the health of the river and the health of these species. So some of these fish are types of fish that will migrate seasonally, and they come back up into the freshwater river during certain times of the year to spawn. And what that means is there may be fish eggs present in the river at certain times of the year during spawning season. So we want to make sure that the operation of this intake, even with that very protective screen design, will not cause impacts to fish eggs when they're present in the river during spawning season and could be flowing past the intake in the river. So we worked, and the county worked with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, again, a resource for this type of work with some of the top marine biologists and scientists to do this modeling to better understand this question. So some quick facts about their model. They looked at 15 different species of fish. They included analysis of 20 years of historical data to help develop a model that would reliably predict flow patterns in the river. And they modeled over 100 miles of river, all the way from the fall line at Fredericksburg down to the Chesapeake Bay. And based on this model, they concluded that the current design of the intake has comparatively low impacts on the fish eggs and larvae in this estuary. So when we think back to the beginning of the discussion tonight about the low withdrawal amount, we're at less than 1%, 0.7% of water flowing past the intake would be withdrawn. Perhaps it's not surprising that there are also very low impacts on salinity, very low impacts to fisheries. We appreciate the results from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science to help confirm those findings. So in the last section here, we'll wrap up briefly with some next steps. First next step is we want to hear from you, and the goal tonight is to have a discussion. We'll take your questions and look forward to answering those in just a moment. You saw earlier in the presentation a view of the pump station at the river intake site as the county acquires, so the permits needed for this project. The next steps will include design and construction of the facility. Again, this is intended to blend in with the aesthetics of the area and to help promote the rural and scenic character of the river in this area. So this pump station is designed to look like a barn so that it doesn't stick out in the environment there along the river. And then what can you expect moving forward with the future of this project? One, it's going to give the county a long-term, reliable water source. There's plenty of water available here to meet the needs of the county as it grows in the future. Second, you can expect high-quality drinking water from a new water treatment plant that will provide the best water quality to the residents and businesses in the county. And last but not least, preservation of groundwater resources. We heard about some of the diminished groundwater capacity in this part of the state, and the county doing its part to minimize the use of groundwater helps to preserve those groundwater resources for all Virginians. Many folks in the county and adjacent counties will continue to rely on groundwater for their water use, for irrigation, for other things, and this project will help the county do its part to preserve those important groundwater resources. So thank you very much, and we look forward to taking your questions here in a moment.
Thank you, Roger. Just want to speak on a few other minor things that we've got going on, just to give you some updates. So one of them that we hear about and we've been hearing are data centers. We did hold a data center town hall meeting last, I think it was November, I believe that was, and we had that and had some experts come in to talk about that. But that's kind of been wrapped into a lot of people saying, well, that's why this project happened. And some of that is because of the water. We originally partnered with King George County. So all of our studies we've been doing has been looking with King George, as well as the two towns, Port Royal and Bowling Green, to be part of our partners. They had, their boards had adopted resolutions of support and to be partners as part of this project. One of the things that came up about 6 months ago or so, in a brand spanking new comment that we had never heard from DEQ was, well, you can't have King George as a partner because you haven't studied how you're going to get a water line over to King George County, which was going to slow us down in getting our permits. So instead of reducing the amount that we spend all the money in allocation, all of our studies on a certain amount, we move that allocation over to data center and industrial cooling as a category to kind of hold on to everything that we had spent the money on and all of our permitting, all of our designs, and everything that had been done. So one of the things that from a county standpoint that we're looking to do is reuse water. So the reuse water is basically water that comes to the wastewater treatment plant that is treated, and then right now we discharge that to the Polecat Creek. We've got in our master plan, it's been looked at, we've done a study of what it would take to actually put in a reuse system where that water would be treated one more level, a pump station we put in, and then we could use that water for industrial cooling. Originally that was done for how could we use that as far as nitrogen and phosphorus allocations, discharging as we go to expand our plant. We need additional allocations to do that. Well, one of the things to reduce that, that's what you're discharging into the stream. Well, if we could use that water elsewhere, then you can increase your flow into the river, not the flow, but you would be able to increase your allocation or how much the plant could treat. Some of that would be going elsewhere. We had talked with both Pendleton as well as Mattaponi Springs to be able to use that as part of watering their facilities there. So that's one of the things that was designed for. It was also talked about what you might hear the term purple pipe. There are communities that actually use purple pipe where they actually run 2 water lines to your house, a purple pipe reuse, and that's used to flush the toilet, and to do those kind of things that you don't need the same amount to be able to drink. So they could water the grass, they could flush their toilet. The TOD project in Calma Church is proposed to be able to use some of this reuse water there as well. So one of the things that we can do, and one of the goals that we have, is to actually use all of our reuse water at the wastewater treatment plant to go towards data cooling. So anything for industrial cooling that's needed to be able to be taking all those allocations that come to the plant. As we continue to grow, those allocations and the amount of water that comes in there it's treated, it would allow us to have more water to be able to use for those type of facilities. As the county's looking to actually start this project, one of the first things we need is the permit, which is what we're working on. So we want to get that first. There is a fact sheet that you all have that's also was in that handout, and it kind of answers a lot of the questions that we hear and that we've gotten from people. So we've tried to address all those questions for you and put that out as a fact sheet so you all can actually have that information in writing and see that. So I think that's important to note. If we were to say go today, so that means I got a permit from DEQ and the Board of Supervisors says move forward with the project, it's going to take about 3 years to do design and permitting. And it's going to take an additional 4 years to do construction. So if you say go today, it'll be 7 years before we'll even be close to getting a drop of water out of the river. So there's still a lot more work to go. This is kind of the first part of the project, is trying to get the intake so that we can try to meet those goals and needs. So with that, I am going to move a bunch of stuff out of the way, and I'm going to invite you up. If anybody's got any questions, if you kind of come up and fill the front seats here, we'll have you come up and provide your name and your voting district. If you're not from Caroline, just say you're not from Caroline, and then we will try to, you can ask your question and sit down, and then we'll have hopefully one of our experts or myself try to answer those questions for you. Well, we're trying to record all this so that we can hear and everybody can hear the questions. All right, David?
David Jenkins, 3rd Port Royal District. Question, have you all reached a good faith agreement with the current landowner for putting in the station?
So the county's not in the process of owning property. That's not what we do as a government, is own property. So having a piece of property that we might not get a permit on, securing the property doesn't make sense in order for us to have that. So at this point, we've been trying to wait to know that we've got a place that we can put that before that's worked out.
All right, with everything I've seen nothing that connects Port Royal to this system. That means that individuals of Rappahannock Academy and Port Royal are going to have to put up with over half of the construction irritation with nothing out of it. What is the citizens of Rappahannock Academy and Port Royal getting out of this system?
Good question, David. So part of that is a reduced benefit of taxes, the tax burden to the citizens as a whole. Right now, the county receives about $20 million in revenue and taxes from the businesses alone that are in the Carmel Church Ladysmith area. So what that means, in order for the county to provide those services, there is a large chunk of change, about 23 cents on the dollar, that the citizens don't have that burden. It actually is placed upon the businesses to help offset some of those costs. So some of that's just reduced taxes to be able to provide fire and rescue services, new fire stations, rescue stations, police, and things of the sort.
At this time, I do want to point out that all my questions and statements are mine and do not reflect any organizations that I may be a part of. Last question on that. How long is the development on 17 going to take once you actually start putting the pipeline down 17, reducing that down to a 1-lane road, causing increased congestion and increased risk for incidents?
So we haven't gotten into the full details of how much time it would take. Some of that's going to depend on the contractor that would be selected for that, whether he starts at both Port Royal and the intake site and works both directions. The intake site itself in the river, that'll be reduced to non-spawning seasons only and be out of wet weather seasons for those constructions to get in the river one time, so it'll be a one and done. It will take some time to dig the 100-foot or so wet well to be able to do that. And then to build the structure around that. So the structure and the intake are probably, by the time all of that's done, allowed to get in the river in a certain time. Most of that will be done on the land, but you're probably looking at a year's construction for that. And then actually going down 17, I don't have a good number, but I would think that we would be able to accomplish that in less than a year. It'll be right now, I believe a 30-inch main is what we've looked at. Is that correct? Yeah, 30-inch main.
The water main is going to go down 17 to Racy Hill, or is it going to go down 17 and Route 2 to Spotsylvania?
No, down 17 to 301 and up the median of 301.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, sir. So the question, the question was, is the water line coming up Route 2? So we had to show an alternative route. One of them was Petmire Hill and coming down Route 2, and the other one was coming through AP Hill. And one of them was, we had to show an alternative, and 2 was working through AP Hill because AP Hill does own the median and 301.
One last thing, we have several wildlife management areas along 17 on that northbound side and several homes. Have those individuals who own property along 17 been notified that their front yard is going to be dug up to put a pipeline down?
So most of the water line will be located on AP Hill's side of the road as we come down, and then it turns into private land, which are bigger land. So as we were doing that, we did have to send notifications to every property owner as we were doing our environmental studies and had those different groups out along the way doing those studies. So at some point they've been discussed with them and knew that we had to come out and actually have access to look at the property.
I'm Corey Davis Garrett. I'm from the Port Royal District, and I am the current owner of the property that's being looked at for this intake facility. And just to set the record straight a little bit, the previous owner was not for this facility either. My family had farmed, they're distant relatives, but my family has farmed that farm since before I was born. And that's actually the first field exactly where the intake is going to go, ironically, that I was ever turned loose with a tractor. At 12 years old, Dad said, "You got it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And before cell phones, came back and picked me up later. But I just wanted to set that straight. Also, they were looking at putting in that, or putting the easement on the property before I acquired the property, my wife and I. They were getting up in age and sold the property to us, knowing that we wanted to preserve the farmland in the shape it was. In the rural preservation district that the county has, it's a 25-acre lot restriction on that side of the river. And so I guess my comment is you seem to use it as a selling point that this open space easement was now on the property. We followed through with what the previous owner had wanted to do with the property. It's also keeping it open is in line with the county rural preservation district. We don't want any more rooftops on the farm, keep it wide open. And so you use that as a plus when really it's a negative. I just wonder if you could comment on that quickly.
First, I did meet with the C's and sat down at their dining room table and discussed the project with them. And, at first they listened to it and their concern was, they didn't want a big structure on their property, and we talked about how we could make it look to fit into the rural characteristics, and that's when we talked about a barn, and they said, well, that might work, but they were not for the project, and we had a couple more meetings with them, and then we were working through their attorney from that point before the property was sold. As far as what my point was is that, trying to preserve drinking water and to make sure that the area is protected, having a preservation easement just stops construction from around those areas and tries to keep that area around the intake as well as the rest of the property in just pristine condition.
So, like, ironically to me, the board of supervisors, they're wanting to keep our district more rural, and they are not allowing any special use exemptions anymore currently at this point in our district. But yet it's a little bit ironic to me that that would serve commercial use as well as some residential is being allowed in that, not being only allowed, but promoted in that same area. The next question I have is on the figures that Roger presented, the salinity levels and the flow amount. It's my understanding, looking over the permit, the 7.9 million gallons a day was brought up and shown, but 13.9 million gallons a day is the max withdrawal. So on a high needs day, you could draw 13.9 million gallons, correct?
You could, on a peak day, yes, sir.
On a peak day.
So, correct, the peak day is 13.9, the average day is 7.9. That's that average that we have to show to the state would be that 7.9 is what we said would be our average flow. So that's 365 day with the average. No, that would be projected at the end of the project through the permitting period.
And
Answer the question you raised.
Yeah,
I wasn't done with that. I was building on that based on the 13.9. But
yeah, just real quick to your question, that both of the modeling efforts that we presented this evening were based on the maximum daily withdrawal rate, 13.9 million gallons per day. That was to make sure that the model is as protective and safe as possible, looking at the highest withdrawal rate. Realistically, typical withdrawals would be lower. The way that it would be permitted, keep in mind, if county withdraws 13.9 MGD on one day, that means the next day they're going to have to withdraw a whole lot less in order to keep that average at 7.9 MGD.
So the numbers again are looking at average river flow, where that's over the course of a year. And if you look at the daily river flow, this year, I think it was around 34 or 32 cubic feet a second is what we got down to for fresh water flow into the river for an extended period of time. And it's not uncommon for those numbers to get below 100 cubic feet a second. And so it's really easy to come up with numbers that look good on average, but in critical drought seasons, when you're pulling 7.9 million gallons a day out of the river, that can't help but have an impact. And y'all are putting this not in Port Royal, but further up the river. In the 2019 meeting when we were at, the reason for that was because of salinity levels. So what, if any, restrictions will be in place if we get in a drought situation and you do get a permit from DEQ? What safeguards will be put in place to protect the river so you're not drawing the salinity further up the river when the inflow into the river is almost nil? I think 32 cubic feet a second, if you do the math, is a little over 20 million gallons a day that's coming into the river. So you pull a 13.9 million gallon on a high flow day, y'all alone are taking over 50% of the river flow on that given day. So over the year, when you take floods, when you take high flow days, yes, the average is very low, but in a critical period, it's quite substantial. So I don't know if you have any comment to that.
It's everything that we looked at and when we did and what DEQ requires is, at the 13.9 maximum amount. So all the studies we did were at the maximum amount. We didn't use the average on any of our studies because of that reason, just to make sure that we were capturing the worst critical point that could happen at any given time. All that we can do is use the numbers that we get from the state, and we use the Virginia Marine I was going to say commission, but VIMS for that study, because they're the independent, they're the professional experts, and we relied on them to provide the information on that. So it wasn't something, we did have our engineers also develop a model, and they came up with very similar information as we went through that process. But
another, and I don't know if there's anyone here that can really answer this question effectively, but I brought it up in one of the Board of Supervisors meetings, the last one, I believe, when you were looking at funding, furthering the permit procedure for this intake, the tax revenue that's been spent. And some of the logic that's used to this point is we've already spent this much money. We can't help but keep going. We're this far in, we've got to keep going. And I've tried to register the concern that you don't have a permit from DEQ yet, and to hold off. But even more than that, whose taxpayer dollars are being spent for this project? And moving forward, are all the residents going to bear the burden of the cost of this project, or the expense that y'all have put into this project to this point, or only the residents that will benefit from this project?
Currently, this is funded by general tax funds, general revenue funds. And they're transferred over into the utility fund. We don't divide up projects based on necessarily who's using that, because with water and sewer, the benefits benefit all taxpayers if it's going to a business, or if that water is going to a school or a county building. Those are not just shared by the utility users. The ratepayers pay for infrastructure and for their water availability and sewer availability. But to develop a project this size just on the ratepayers, you would never get anything done. And like it or not, the Board of Supervisors over the history of the board has approved thousands of lots that when the developers want to develop those lots, we're on the hook as a county to provide the utilities for those. That's already been agreed to. And as we tried to show you in the initial slides, we can't keep getting water out of the ground. And it's not what the state wants to see us do, is to keep drilling wells, which we're having to do, especially in the bedrock area. And with those, we have to treat all that water. So all that water comes out of the ground, it's not usable. And we spend millions putting in sand filters, green sand filters, to treat that water to a standard that we can actually put it in the system. But it's still not like treated water would be, that would be surface water, which doesn't have anything in it. But no, it's funded by all the taxpayers, just like lots of projects within the county.
And so it goes without saying that the amount of water that was used for data centers, if they were to come in, or any commercial development, that the people that would benefit are not directly the taxpayers of Caroline County, correct?
I don't understand your question. So if world-class distribution builds a 1.2 million square foot building and we're serving them with how much water?
About 40,000 gallons.
40,000 gallons a day, and they're paying $1 million in tax revenue to the county, that's not a benefit to you as a taxpayer, that I don't have to get that $1 million they pay off of houses? And the jobs, the 700 jobs that are provided by the business that are potentially for residents. So, well, I'm just saying, he asked a question, I'm trying to answer it. It's that, so businesses that come here provide value to the community in jobs and tax revenue. And they take infrastructure to be able to do that. Data centers, there's none here. And the only one that the board's even approved, the utilities are coming out of Spotsylvania, not Caroline, would not be receiving any water or sewer or reuse water from Caroline. So if that gets done, because it still hadn't been approved by Spotsylvania, that's not a utility burden to us. In any other data center, it's unknown whether that's going to be a water-cooled or an air-cooled, because of both of those type of situations now in data centers that don't necessarily have large flows of water. But general businesses that we get use water. McDonald's and convenience stores and all this, with you have to have those utilities to be able to get those businesses. And you don't want a community that's only made up of residences, because the tax burden on the residents is a whole lot higher if you don't have businesses to spread that out on.
And so what's the plan or the numbers as far as keeping our tax rate low? Because to me, that's a carrot on a stick at this point. Like, where is that plan in numbers that residents can look at it and see that?
I don't exactly understand what you're asking for me to say that the rate should never go above 80 cents or 83. I mean, everything, especially since 2020, has gone up. Every expense the county has you've got to pay more at the grocery store. I know you farm, you grow all, you go to the store. Groceries are up 35% since 2020. Same thing for everything we buy. Chemicals at the wastewater treatment plant are up what?
Doubled.
They've doubled. So all of our expenses have gone up. We can't necessarily keep the tax rate flat, but you're either a growing community or you're a dying community. You're just going to sort of run along with no growth.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for taxes to stay where they were. I'm just saying that y'all are saying that we're going to foot the bill as a whole county for this intake. But the benefit will be in the future of we won't have to raise taxes on you as fast. And I'm saying that may not be so.
You'd have to come to the front, but I'm not promising you that it's not any benefit. The biggest issue for this is, in the future, this community is going to need more water than we will be able to get out of the ground. And if we don't plan for that now and get our permit and get our intake in the river, some other community is going to get in the river, and that water source is not going to be available. So the next nearest water source is the Potomac. I can't imagine the cost to get to the Potomac River from Carmel church where the water plant needs to go. So this is not a 10-year look. This is 15, 20 years that we're going to need this water, and you can't wait as evidence for how long it's taken to try to get this permit with all the studies and the changing rules that we've had to get the permit. We can't wait till the day we go, uh-oh, we're out of water, to go, we got to go get it. We're going to be 10 years with no water. And so we can't do that. That wouldn't be good government to do that for the Board of Supervisors to go, that's somebody else's problem. We will worry about that later when you can look at all of your modeling. At just a board meeting 2 meetings ago, we had VRE here talking about the growth that they think Caroline's going to see by 2050. It's amazing. So will that happen? I don't know. It's not my numbers, but that's what they were showing the board. We have to plan for it now. And yes, the taxpayers now will foot some of that bill for citizens that will live here in the future. And you may not be here, you may move, whatever, but somebody's got a plan because it takes so long to get it.
Can I put this in a little bit of perspective? And
Come to the podium.
I'm loud enough. I don't need the microphone.
But it's being streamed and everything, so, and they can't hear in the back.
Let me see if I can put this into a better perspective that
Can you step up just?
somebody
Yes, if you could.
somebody can actually figure out. I work for Henrico.
Can you, your name and your voting district?
My name's Rory Edwards. I'm in Reedy Church.
Thank
I work for Henrico County's Public Works. Okay. Right now, Henrico has a reservoir that is currently being built, has been being built for the past 15 years or so. Okay. You want to know where the problem is? We have a giant hole in the ground. All right. Can't get water to it. You know why? Henrico's on the hook with Richmond for the next 100 years. Guess who pays for that giant hole in the ground? The residents of Henrico. Okay. This is where I'm going with it. And I'm kind of building off of what you're saying. Is his biggest concern is you got this giant project. If it goes dead, who's on the hook? We are. Not necessarily the people 50 years from now. Yeah. Right. It's those of us now. We're the ones footing the bill for something that may or may not happen. Okay? Now, on top of that, you were saying, yeah, the ground is a sponge. Yes, the ground is a sponge. And at the same time, the more you beat the ground, the more you're beating the water out of the ground. What happens when you build? You're beating the water. You're beating the water out of the ground, which for people like myself, who have been in the county for 3 years, I haven't had an issue with my well up until a month ago. And now all of a sudden, I got a 45-foot well, 15 inches of water. I had to drop closest to 20 feet of water back into my well just so I could have water. I got a 5-year-old who likes to take relatively long baths. I have a wife who likes to take long showers. That doesn't help me none. You start beating the water, all of us that are on shallow wells, or deep wells for that matter, are screwed. You got people, you're running a CIP project that's, I don't know the exact distance, but you're expecting the taxpayers to pay for it now for something 50 years from now that we won't see a drop of it. Am I more or less building off of what you're saying? Yeah. He's trying, what he's essentially getting at is we don't want to end up like Henrico, that you got a project that nobody's using because we can't use it for the next 100 years until the lease runs out in Richmond. That's ultimately what he's getting at. Yes, I understand that the finances have to be foot now. I get it. I work on enough CIP projects. I get how it's paid for. I get a lot of it. I've done them. I've worked on them. It's part of my job, which I understand they have to be funded. But if they go dead, I've seen enough of them go dead. I've seen the problems with the projects. So that's what he's trying to figure out.
Let me explain a little bit part of that to you. Nobody's planning to fund this project in its entirety. First off, we are trying to obtain our permit. Once we have our permit, then we will obtain the land, and then we will design. Then it'll be up to the board over a period of years, because our permit's good for 10, to get the intake built. So the intake structure may not be built until sometime in the 30s. So taxpayers right now aren't necessarily funding that. Taxpayers have funded all the studies and all the things that have been done since 2005 to obtain the permit, but there is no CIP project to fully put the water system in. We're trying to get our permit, and then over a 10-year period, get the intake in. If at such time there's growth that needs it, there are businesses that are going to provide the tax revenue that we can borrow against in a revenue type bond, a utility revenue bond, to borrow the money to be able to pay it back based on the revenues that we're going to receive. Then it's possible the board may move forward, but those times are way off. The point that you cannot wait and ask DEQ, I would like a permit at some point in time in the future. We have been working on this permit for years and years. All of these studies are not going to be allowed to be put on the shelf and pulled out in 2030. You'll have to do all of that over. And so, yes, we're not trying to stop and then basically throw that work away and say, well, maybe 10 years from now, we'll ask for the permit. We can get the permit and not do really anything and hold on to it for a number of years. We can ask for a renewal if, say, the economy tanks and we don't need it for that. People get sewer permits. I think there's a permit active still at Haymount. Any of you familiar when that was rezoned in the 90s? They're still getting their permits renewed by DEQ. So they will renew permits, but you got to get it. That is the important part. Doesn't have to be built tomorrow, and there's no plans. There's no money to do any of that. There's no money to do the engineering on any of that. We've got the money to do the engineering on this and to obtain the permit. So I think we've gotten way out that we're building something that we're not going to need. We're not building anything. We're trying to obtain a permit.
Going back to the flows for the water and the intake structure, the inflow velocity was mentioned, but it was my understanding that the way the intake for structure was being built, you would back flush it to get the sediment out of the intake and keep that pipe clean. That was from the 2019 meeting, what was given in that one. What would the velocity required for that back flush be in order to get the sediment that is collecting in the pipe back out into the river? And how would that change the basin of the river around the intake structure?
Thanks for your question. As you noted, the flow of water into the intake screens is very slow and very gradual. Over time, there could be some sediment. Maybe during the fall, there's some leaves that get deposited on the outside of those screens, and it needs to be cleaned off. These screens are submerged in the river at a depth so they won't interfere with boat traffic. So there needs to be a way to periodically clean those screens. What's typically done is actually an air cleaning as opposed to a backflush. There aren't any plans for a water backflush at this point. It would be an air-based cleaning system where air could be bubbled back inside the screen just during its operation, and the movement of that air out through the screen will clean any sediment, any leaves off of the screen. So there's no flow of water back into the river and no change on the velocity of water through the screen as a result. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I wasn't asking about keeping the screen clean as much as the sediment in the pipe that will build up over time. Like, how will that be cleaned out?
Sure, yeah. Similarly, there's not a system in place, no backflush system in place to clean that pipe. What we've seen with other intakes is that over time, as water, perhaps with some very small pieces of sediment that make it through those small screen slots, might get deposited in the pipeline between the screens and the pump station that you saw on that graphic. But generally speaking, if there is any sediment, it's going to move through that pipe as it moves over to the pump station, and it will either be pumped through to the system to be treated and removed, or it may be deposited in the wet well of the pump station, the bottom of the pump station, where it could be cleaned if necessary. But that would all be without any effects to the river.
And just a couple more points. If you look online at the Virginia Marine Resource website, you can see where the county and DEQ have gone back and forth recently, a lot in the past 4 to 6 months, where DEQ has been asking for more clarification or more documentation on the demand for the water, like that y'all say you need. And there's been a back and forth with a lot of, you have 15 days to respond to what we've asked for. And leading up to this, Mr. Schiebel, your direct comments to the Board of Supervisors have been for years now, since the 2019 meeting that was had here, that a permit is 90 days out, months away, imminent. The last Board of Supervisors meeting that I came and spoke about spending more taxpayer dollars for funding this project, I guess the permitting that y'all were looking at going ahead with then, you assured the Board of Supervisors that there was no way you wouldn't get a permit. But yet, Mr. Cully earlier said they're not looking at acquiring the property till you're sure you have a permit. So it's a bummer that DEQ is not here tonight to be able to ask them directly. I was really hoping for that. But can you shed any light on, like, the last back and forth? I think the last document that was posted online was just posted a couple days ago, but where that stands, do you have a permit? Are you going to get a permit? How soon, like, with any degree of confidence?
Well, I can hear some of the frustrations that you have, that we have the same frustrations, because DEQ, we meet with them in groups and meet with, typically with them, it's 5+ staff members. Sometimes it's been as many as 12, 15 people around a table from DEQ and regulatory agencies saying, we've got everything we need. We'll be getting you a draft permit in the next 60, 90 days, whatever that is. And we're waiting for that. And then we get, we've got a new question. You need to respond to it. So really DEQ, because we put so much pressure on them lately, because 270 days is typically to get a permit. That's written in DEQ. If you look at that, 270 days. We are now over 1,400 days away from getting a draft permit. So all that we're going to get is a draft permit. So once we have a draft permit, then DEQ will give that to us and say, all right, here's what we're thinking we're going to give you for a permit. It'll give us the allocations, and then they'll have a public comment period time. And then after they go through that, then it goes to the Virginia Marine Resource Commission, and then they have to look at all that data, and then they are give the final blessing before we actually get our final permit. So the draft permit, we've been told in the next 60 days. I can only tell you what they tell us, and that's what I give to the board. So, every time that we're talking with them, we're putting a lot more pressure on them, saying, guys, it's been over 1,400 days. We need to do something. They keep coming up with new comments that have never been asked, so we don't have a problem answering their questions, and we're just frustrated that give us all your questions. We'll be glad to answer them. And they're kind of to string us along. Here's 2 questions. We go through, we do it that, we give it back to them. Oh, we got 2 more questions. We got 5 more questions. Oh, we got 1 more. So we just feel like we're being stringed along in some ways on that. So we're frustrated, from staff and even my engineers, of why is this taking so long? Why are we dragging that out? So
I hear that, but it looks a little bit more like, if you look online, that they ask for more documentation on something that they've asked for before, and what the county responds back with is basically the exact same thing that you've said before. So it's left me scratching my head some, wondering just what exactly is going on.
Well, do you want to comment on that? I mean, because you do have most of the coordination with DEQ, but I don't know that they're asking the same questions.
Yeah, we have had a series of back and forth with DEQ, especially last year, and as you noted, until early parts of this year. I think questions have been different at each stage, and we've been in discussions with them to understand what additional information they're looking for to provide that information. I think, as was discussed earlier, there had been some turnover throughout their staff throughout this process that's led to some inefficiencies in the process, quite frankly, and so we're working through that with them to provide the information that they're looking for in a timely manner. Some of the things that they're asking have changed only because of the time that has elapsed. So with the 1,400 plus days that's elapsed, as things change over time, they're looking for additional information about any changes that have taken place since that permit application was initially submitted.
Also, recently they've asked questions about the quantity of water. So there's been several questions, but they've been different questions. So one is, well, you've got X amount for industrial cooling. Where did that? How do you develop that number? Where did it come from? So the number that we've shown is a lot higher than the number that was in the permit, because we don't plan on using potable water for data centers. We're planning on using reuse water mostly for that. So it's part of that. And then they asked about the TOD project that's in Carmel Church that the board has approved. There's 10,000 lots there behind Flying J, 95-207 Hanover line and Route 1. So there's a big development that comes in there. If that project takes off and there's a large influx of money and the developer moves forward with that, they're going to require a lot more water. So there were questions that were revolving around that, as well as where did that number come from, and how is that a real project? They didn't realize in our meeting that project had already been rezoned. They didn't realize that it was all owned by a property owner. It wasn't speculative as far as there's a bunch of different properties. It's all owned by the same person. They didn't realize there was a development plan, a phase plan. So that's what and we sat in our meeting and discussed that. They're like, well, we didn't realize it. Can you provide that information to us? So those are really the last few comments have been similar, but they've been on different subject matters as far as the amount of water and where we're using it.
Okay, because they were mainly the 2 points that it looked like DEQ was hitting home on, or trying to, that the county wasn't giving a whole lot of new information on, was where the demand numbers were coming from to get to where y'all were saying you would be by 2038 versus where you are currently at not even 2 million gallons a day usage. And then wetlands maps, because that was one issue that I'd brought up with DEQ way back when we first got the first batch of letters, because your pipeline project does not delineate wetlands on farms that we rent, that we've had wetlands delineations done by Soil and Water that show wetlands. So I was just like, the back and forth, there doesn't seem like a lot of new information. And I guess just to circle back to the original thing about owning the property and where I stand, I've been assured through this process that nobody, this is a long-term project. It won't happen soon. I don't want it to happen ever on my land. And when I've brought up eminent domain, I've been told, oh, nobody's talking about eminent domain. We're not talking about eminent domain. But there's no way to get there from here without ending up in that battle. Correct?
You got it, all right.
We can't talk about eminent domain unless the Board of Supervisors is talking about it. The staff doesn't have any ability to condemn any property. So until such time as the Board of Supervisors makes that decision, that's not anything we can speculate on one way or the other. Obviously, if you don't want to sell and the Board of Supervisors ultimately want to move forward with this project, you can draw your own conclusions, but we can't talk about that. That is a process that's defined by state law. So I just, there's nothing we can do.
Good evening. Tim Davis, Port Royal District. Wasn't asked, but 21 years, same location. I have my own well. I drive my garbage to the local convenience center. kids don't go to school in the county. So that's just kind of laying out my, and my property taxes have gone up a lot since I first moved here 21 years ago. So that's just a statement of facts. Where can we find, I'm playing catch up on this, so where can we find, you talk about all the Q&As that have happened, all the studies, both, from all these agencies and where can we find all that? The answers, the Q&A and the studies and models and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we brought some of the information and studies that have been done. I brought tonight just of the studies that are in my office that are available for public view anytime that anybody wants that, and are free to copy and to have copies if necessary on those. It's if you go on the DEQ's got a nice portal now that everything gets put onto that portal. Anybody can get into that portal and see any comments from any regulatory agencies, any of our responses from our engineers. So everything's on that portal that's viewable to the general public. So that was one of the benefits that they had with this new portal system is everybody and anybody can see what's in it.
Okay, so the DEQ site will have only things that involve DEQ, or it'll have everything? Okay, great.
Yeah, so DEQ, it's a joint permit application. So when it goes through, DEQ is the clearinghouse for all the agencies. So they send it out to everybody that has any regulatory requirements on this, whether it's the Corps of Engineers, the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, the Marine Resources, all that goes out to that group. DEQ is the one that's responsible for collecting, disseminating, and making sure that information's there and collected in one place.
I'm familiar with that portal because I forgot to mention in those 21 years, the county has, because of DEQ, allowed biosolids to be spread all around my property. So
not because we wanted it.
Well,
the county didn't allow anything. The state took that right from counties.
My apologies. I withdraw my my statement about Caroline County, not about DEQ. So the basis for the water needs to study the future from 1 to 3 to all the way up to, I think, close to 8 million gallons a day. So what is that need? There must be a model or a plan, growth plan or something. What is that based on?
So when we look at that, every 5 years we update our water master plan, and we have to look out 30 years. And part of that looking out requires us to look at the county's comprehensive plan, which really defines the growth in the county, what that growth looks like, where it can happen at, how much can happen. So as you look at that and you start seeing these areas that are now zoned, such as the TOD project, it's got 8,500 homes in there. It's got work-live units. It's got a lot of commercial that's in there. There's a fire and rescue station that originally was talked about in there. Now we've got a new station we're getting ready to open. They talked about a ball diamond. There's just a bunch of things. So as we're looking, it's like, where does this happen? How does this all fit into there? And that's part of the comprehensive plan. So as we're looking at the comprehensive plan, it looks at Pendleton and what's been zoned there and what can grow. Ladysmith Village, what's zoned there. Belmont, what's there and what can grow. The TOD project. So it looks at all these areas, and then it looks at the development areas, such as Ladysmith at the interchange there, where we've just put in the new 4-lane roads. It looks at anything that could be built in there. What is that currently zoned? And what do we see trying to look at from the planning perspective of our planning department of, who's got the best crystal ball. In 2006 or 7, Caroline County was on, one of those lists you don't like being on, as one of the 10 fastest growing communities in the United States. And you think about that, wow, Caroline County, and that was by percentage. We were growing a lot. I mean, we had the most utility connections in any given year during that time, and that's before the stock market crash. But so, again, we're looking at that crystal ball, trying to see. We're looking at Weldon Cooper and other resources that are out there as the county's developing those plans, and how do we meet those needs?
Where are they building 8,500 homes?
So that's the TOD, the Transient Oriented Development in Carmel Church. So that's it's zoned for that. So they can come in if they can get a developer, but that's behind the Flying J in Carmel Church. Flying J Denny's, if that helps you. So it's all that vacant land behind there. It's got the rail that goes through it.
And I would add, the water master plan's done by an engineering firm.
Yes.
And so it's not the staff that's doing it. We work with engineering firm, give them, when they sit with planning, they sit with the utilities, sit with me, and we talk about the things that have already been approved by the board over the last 25 years and what potential there is, what's coming our way that we can think of, what businesses we think might be on the horizon that economic development's working with. And then that's put into that master plan. And that's what they come up with, what they think the water amount is, not staff.
So we can look at the all right, sorry. We can look at the comprehensive master plan and we can see where all this came from. That is the question. Okay, so, and so the current numbers that are getting used are from when you said it had to be every 5 years? I forget who said that.
Yeah. So we update our water master plan typically on a 5-year rotation.
Okay.
So we're ready to issue that out this coming fiscal year to be updated again.
Okay. So those numbers will change.
Yeah. Every 5 years we look at, because it adds another 5 years further down.
Okay. So I saw in the presentations, there was a picture of this thing that goes in the river. So where has this been done around? Has this been done around this area before putting this kind of thing in the river? And what were the results of it? Where has this been done?
Sure, thank you for the question. You're asking about the screens that would go on the end of the pipe into the river?
Big piece of metal that you're putting down. Yep.
Sure. Yeah, that's a screen. It's made of stainless steel, and like I said, there's some samples of it up here. Sure. This is actually a design standard in the States based on some research done previously at VCU on best practices to protect the river on intakes. And so this has been done commonly in Virginia in recent years. Just top of mind is Henrico, because someone mentioned Henrico. They have now 2 intakes on the James River, which use these type of screens. These. Sure.
Not necessarily our intake. It's a technology.
Yeah, these are installed there, as well as many other utilities that are using this technology currently. Loudoun County constructed a similar raw water pump station on the Potomac River in recent years using screens exactly like this one. It's been operating for 4 or 5 years successfully at this time. So there's another recent example.
And I don't know who in this project would be doing this, but have we looked at how those projects have gone and if there were lessons learned from that or challenges or issues from that? It would seem like with such a large project that you would be looking at past implementations and making sure we don't repeat mistakes.
So I would say, yes, we have done that. The county actually had an independent study done on the wedge weir screens. So it used to be just recently 3 millimeter openings were allowed. And as the standard keeps getting tighter and tighter, when we actually started this project back up, and I would say right about 7 years ago, we really hit this hard trying to move forward and getting the permit. And in that portion, we automatically, even though the standard when we started was 3 millimeters, we automatically went with 1, said we're going with the 1 because that's the best that's out there. So we took that hit from the very beginning and didn't even work on the 3, knowing that we wanted to be as efficient as we can. So Duquesne Electric was part of that study. They've got intakes all over the country that they use these same type of technologies for cooling power plants and other things. And then there's a lot of technology for screens that are used by any kind of a river or water intake that's out there.
Sure. I guess I want to be clear that I'm not talking about the screens, right? I'm talking about like the big picture. This is a large scale project that our county has never done, right? So are we looking at other local counties or wherever this has been done and consulting with them at least and saying, hey, how did you do it? How did you handle the the property rights, or what was the challenge with this or that? I'm not trying to call out property rights. I'm just saying, has that happened?
So we, as the county, hired Hazen because they are the experts. This is what they deal with day in and day out. They know intakes around the country and have spent a lot of time doing that. So that's why we hired them. So I'll let Roger kind of respond a little bit because this is really their bread and butter of designing intakes. And in any locality such as Richmond or Spotsylvania, they've got these bigger intakes that they use. Hanover's got some. Anytime there's an intake along where you're sucking water out of the river, typically there's screens in their bigger projects. So I think in the scheme of pulling water out of the river, it's relatively a small project in comparison to our neighbors.
Sure, thank you. I'd just add that, yes, we do this all day, every day. And so certainly we have done a lot of work with utilities throughout Virginia, throughout the country on both existing intakes. How do we work with those, make them better, designing new intakes, both from our own experience and learning from the experience of other utilities. Yes, we're doing that very frequently.
Okay.
Yeah, that was from one of our projects in North Carolina, constructed last year using the same screen technology.
Okay. And I'll kind of end it by just saying, I get that you guys know the engineering part of it, right? And I guess I'm looking more from the idea of clearly the technology works, right? But it's a different implementation for every county in terms of not talking about the necessarily equipment, but perhaps more logistical issues, and that I guess is what I was getting at. But I get it. You guys have due diligence in terms of the groups and the data's out there, and I can look at it. But I guess that's what I'm looking at. It just seems to me, and maybe I'm being simplistic, that hey, Hanover, Loudoun, wherever, right? How did that go, right? What could you tell me as, I'm sorry, whatever position you have, your same counterpart, like what should I know about this to help assure that it's going to be successful?
Yeah, and as we get into this, we lean on our neighbors to understand what they've done and try to learn not to duplicate the same things that they have done mistake-wise. And likewise, if they've got things that are good, we try to do that. And these guys, they work with local governments. That's really their bread and butter is working with them, trying to make projects work. And there's as many similarities as there are differences on every project. Your water depth, your water quality, your environmental impacts they're all different, but they're hurdles and things and that everybody has tried. There's new technologies that are coming out every day. I just meeting with Essex County Conservation Alliance. They told us about this, I'm going to use the word sonar, radar. Actually, as a fish is swimming by, they can actually take an image of it and it'll actually record what kind of fish it was. So, I mean, this is newer technology that's out there. It's pretty neat of things that are developed day in and day out, and new technologies that are going to be able to be put into use in the future to help improve, the protection of the environment.
Okay, perfect segue. So rivers are clearly extremely important to this whole region, right? Rappahannock is probably one of the top ones as far as this area is concerned. We have a lot of different environmental groups, from the local Friends of the Rappahannock to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I'm sure there's many more. I guess I could get the answer from the Q&A, but I don't have it. So has any environmental group come out and said, yeah, this is good, we support this? Or even just said, we support the findings, that we're not opposed to it because we agree with the findings? Is there anyone who isn't saying this is a bad idea from the environmental groups?
I think what we've heard from the environmental groups, one drop's too much. We did hear from the Rappahannock tribe that said if it was used strictly for drinking water, it would be fine. So when it's used for drinking water, does that mean you can't use it for flushing toilets and taking showers? But they said if it was only used for drinking water for residents, they would be okay with it, but they're the only group. Everyone else is, there's better places and better ways to do that. Do we need to actually have growth? Why do we need to have these things? So I don't know that there's none of them really that have come out and said, yep, we're good with this project.
Right. So nobody has come out and, okay.
That's right.
All right. So what happens if this project goes through and then all of a sudden the people upstream from us in the counties or even on the Rapidan, the feeders to the Rappahannock River, that they start doing this, right? So I'm thinking specifically like the Colorado River area is a disaster, right? You know, communities running out of water. And I'm not trying to say we're in that boat, but what do we do if we've done all these studies based on this much salinity and this much flow and everything, and then all of a sudden, 10,000 gallons, 20,000 gallons, however many, right? It's not just Caroline who's got water issues, right? So what happens to this project then? Does it have to get turned off? Is there going to be restrictions, or do we just say, oh no, we're going to keep getting our 8 million gallons of water and screw the salinity or anything like that? Not trying to be.
So to kind of answer that, Caroline County is going through our process of getting a permit and doing everything that we're being asked that's laid out by law, and a lot, we're doing things above and beyond that, but we're basically trying to meet that standard. So DEQ, as well as the health department, are the ones that are responsible for the drinking water and for the environment. They're the ones who, say this is what we need. There's different legislation when we start looking at the entire area. For instance, the groundwater management area is a perfect example. It started off on the Eastern Shore, and now it's in Caroline County. I used to not have to deal with any DEQ permitting on our wells that were in groundwater sediment area, so that weren't in bedrock, anything from I-95 eastward. So I've got wells that have been reduced by the state by more than 50%, even though the health department says that I can pump, let's just say, 250 million gallons a day out of a particular well per year. DEQ has come back and said, well, you can only pump 110 million gallons out of that. So DEQ is going to be restrictive and look at protecting the environment as they're authorized to do through legislation. So they're responsible for the overall quality and quantity and the care of the state, and we're trying to permit through our process with them.
So this is not, so I'm trying to understand here. So if this project goes through, it's not okay, you've got all your permits, you're good to go forever. It's more of, so long as conditions don't change, you can take this water, but if there's a significant drop in availability of water in the Rappahannock in that area, we could be told, stop pulling water.
Could be, yes, sir, just like we were with our wells.
I don't believe that's from they're going to give it to somebody else. So anybody else that goes to get a permit is going to have to go through the same things we did, and they'll have to study their salinity based on the models that include our water withdrawal in this area. So if they're not going to suddenly give somebody 12 million gallons 5 miles up the river from where they've already given this intake. In the same vein, they're not going to let somebody put a sewer discharge near our water intake. So it's the first come, first serve on these things, both on the sewer and the water side, because all of it has to be permitted and all of it has to be looked at, holistically. So there are protections. If the river suddenly dries up due to climate change, clearly there'll be something that would change.
Right.
Supposedly climate change will put more water everywhere. So I don't know, but it won't be because they just suddenly give a permit to Spotsylvania to take 30 million gallons out of the river to the west of us. I mean, they got to go through a permit, and it'd have to be studied.
Okay.
Correct.
So I get that. I'm not convinced. I don't know the map, so I don't know if there's parts of the watershed for the Rappahannock that is out of the state, and I would never put it past a government to be able to sneak something through to, things change, right? But the bottom line is we think we don't think there'll be an issue because it's first come, first serve, but we don't have a guarantee that won't happen, that there's no guarantee if the water levels change for whatever reason.
Correct. And I would say if the county was going and asking for a 100 million gallon a day permit, that's a no. You know, you have to be able to, so just because we want 100 million gallons a day to protect us for the next 1,000 years, the county just can't go out and say, well, we want, you know, a 100,000 gallon permit. That's not, you know, that's not how that permit works. It's you have to be able to justify over a period of time. And you know, in the future, we might have to go back and ask for more, you know, 50 years from now. We don't know how much water will be needed in 50 years and conservation measures. And I truly believe, and it's already starting, that we're starting to see reuse water being treated and being used back as drinking water. In this country, you know, that doesn't sound so good, but it's done in a lot of other countries and done successfully.
Right. I agree. So Bob, you said King George is part of their supporting, or they're out, or
they are now out. They were part of our project. Originally, we met with them. We met with both the Board of Supervisors as well as the what's the utility group? The authority, thank you, just drew a blank. The water authority, we met with both of those groups. Both of them adopted resolutions for that. Since then, because of the comments that DEQ had of additional studies and money that was required, it appeared that it was going to take an additional 2 years for them to remain as a partner on that. So it was either, we got to stop our permit, and if we stopped our permit, DEQ was going to basically end the permit, and then we would have to start over from scratch, right, or remove them as a partner. We met with them and spoke with them about that. They understood where we were at. Doesn't mean that they can't come back and be a partner in the future. It just means right now they're not part of that permit.
Okay. And I guess you said Port Royal and Bowling Green are also, I guess I don't understand, because aren't they both Caroline County?
They are, but they've got an independent government that runs their water systems that are owned by them.
Have we made any agreements as part of this that they're going to get a certain amount of water, or?
There is allocations in the permit as part of that that's dedicated towards them.
Okay.
Right now, the county has paid 100% of those costs, and there is not a requirement if they determine in the future that this is too costly or something that they don't want to do. They're not being forced to do something that they wouldn't want to do.
Okay, but they're not, even though they're independent, they're not chipping in money as part of this, right?
They're not. They're still citizens of Caroline County as well.
Okay, got it.
Yes, sir.
Who decides how this water gets used?
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Is there any restriction on this water being sold? Yeah, like the way Richmond appears to be doing? Is there any restriction on that? Like, there's been a lot of, the reason for the question, there's been a lot of talk about the benefit to the county, right? And I get it, right? I drive on the roads, but I can't afford the roads. So there's things like that I appreciate the county does. But I don't want to see this project happen and then find out we're just going to sell it and try and make more money. So what are the restrictions on this use of water, if there are any?
There are no restrictions placed on us by DEQ that I'm aware of. I don't know any jurisdiction that surrounds us that would be willing to buy the water from us.
I'm talking about, but okay, well.
I mean, because they already got water. I mean, Spotsylvania's got water, Hanover's got water. There's no.
Right now, everybody's got water.
Right, yeah.
But that's not the question. That's
right.
Not the question.
I know, but that would be the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. So
the Board of Supervisors controls what would go on with any asset in the county, not staff.
Okay, fair answer.
So, and nobody can, an elected Board of Supervisors, that changes every 4 years, so.
Got it. So was there ever part of this, I know there was alternatives looked at in study, was there ever anything that looked at, hey, since, like I said, I'm on a well, since we are funding this, the taxpayers, current taxpayers, for all good reasons, why don't we focus on existing residents first and get them on county water. And then it will go to development. In other words, I get that the Board of Supervisors has promised this water, right? But was it ever considered that someone like me who's been in the county for 21 years should get access to this water?
The overall cost of collection is way more than the cost of production. The same goes for sewer. So running water pipe all around the county would be exorbitant, and nobody would ever be able to afford to do that per foot water line.
It's interesting what people.
So a 12-inch water main running down that people would connect to are probably running $150 a foot.
$150 a foot
So
for
no.
miles. No, it just is, it's not practical. Where we're trying to provide the water is in our growth areas where the Board of Supervisors over the last 20 plus years has approved thousands of buildable lots.
Mm-hmm.
All the developers have to do is put that in, put the pipe in the ground. We have to provide the utilities for that.
I get it.
It's not a decision staff made. That is just.
I understand. The question was it considered? I'm not blaming the staff, right? And I didn't ask how expensive it was. I'm allowed to be selfish and ask that question, right?
So and because of the time and in trying to give everybody a chance, I'd like you to ask one more if you've got one more, and then if you want to come back around at the end, then
Sure.
we'll
Okay.
stay around and
Yeah.
we can have conversations after. But trying to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask questions.
You got it. I'm gonna then pick my favorite question here. So I understand you guys don't make the decision on. I'd rather ask this question. Sorry. So does the federal government, like the EPA or anything, could they potentially ever have a say on the use of this water? Like if they decide there's all of a sudden an impact, like I'm thinking of like Endangered Species Act, right? You know, if there's they have federal government has a lot of power, is my understanding, if there's something like that happens. So could the EPA or some other federal agency come in and say, everybody's got to stop? I'm not just saying Caroline, right? But everybody stop, this thing, salinity, whatever, water levels is endangered. Stop taking that water.
I mean, they've got the ability to tell us to stop. So it's, yeah, they could.
So they do. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
My name's William Brooks. I've been gone for about 44 years. I was born and raised north of Carolina. I'm in the Bowling Green district. I've been back about 14 years. When I came back in 2010, not a whole heck of a lot changed around here. I knew where I was going, this, that, and the other. A couple new bills popped up. The last 14 years, Carolina really hadn't grown that much. Seen a couple divisions, some small subdivisions pop up. What I'd like to know is I saw a slide with one glass on it in 2024, and in 2038, there were like 10 glasses. Where did that estimate come from? Is that just a guesstimate?
So yes, that's where we've sat down with the planning department, looked at the comp plan. We also got looking at other data of where, like Weldon Cooper that does population studies and growths. And then that was also looked at the developments and talking with the developers on their build out and their build out cycles of how fast that they can build homes. And
okay. That's how fast you can if you have to. Is there something we don't know or that I don't know with regard to the development in Caroline County? 8,200 homes over at Carmel Church. That's why the water's got to get down there. There's some kind of developer wants to push this through.
Well,
but they don't have enough water because the underground aquifer isn't big enough to handle everything. And that's why we have to pump water from the Rappahannock all the way down to Carmel Church, which is like carrying a glass of water from Fredericksburg to some dude up in Washington, D.C. because he's thirsty. So the point I'm trying to make is there's something we don't know. If we have expenses, why isn't some of these expenses deferred to the developers? Why is it that the taxpayers got to foot everything until after the fact? They're the ones making the profit on it. If they say they can't sell homes because you're going to increase the price, well, I mean, that's just a fact. It's like if I want to buy something from Walmart, they pass the cost on to me. So why can't we pass? I can understand Caroline needs to grow in some respect. If we have offers for real estate property, if we have offers for industries and this, that, and the other, why can't they foot some of the bill? I mean, if we have an Amazon, I don't know. I found this out a couple of months ago through the grapevine. Amazon wants to start a data plant somewhere. Okay, that takes a lot of water. And that's understood. But why can't they foot some of the bill? They make a hell of a lot of money.
So every connection that we get, so let's take Trader Joe's, for instance, world-class distribution in Carmel Church. They built that huge 1.2 million square foot facility. When they connected, they had to pay an availability fee. That availability fee pays for debt service on the system.
The availability fee, is that a back payment on the cost of the program that brought them water?
So that is their portion of helping to pay for the utilities that we have. So every home that's built, we collect a $6,500 availability for sewer and a $6,000 availability fee for water. That's on every single home that's built. Every single structure that's built, such as MC Dean. MC Dean in the last 4 months has connected 4 of their buildings to public water and sewer and have paid over $240,000 to the county to help offset the cost of utilities.
There's always a connection fee. You build a brand new house, you got to pay a connection fee.
Correct.
Well, that's totally different.
And then, so
that's
MC
a connection
Dean,
fee associated with the construction of the house.
So MC Dean extended a sewer line from the wastewater treatment plant to their facility, and they paid for the cost.
And I do understand that. And I understand that, you know, Caroline County doesn't grow rather large on a residential area compared to Spotsylvania or Henrico County or Hanover County or this, that, and the other. But when you look at the big picture, if there's developers coming in here that want to build large developments, and if there's industries that want to come in here, why can't they foot part of the bill instead of the taxpayer having to do the whole thing, and then they pay a connection fee? And then because of the amount of water they use and because of the agreement you came to with regards to county and state tax so they can have their facility here, that's a totally different entity. I just can't see the community having to pay for everything up front for a large 8,200 house development. I mean, you have a developer that's going to make a lot of profit off those 8,200 homes. So why can't he foot part of the bill? That's one of my questions.
First off, your first question, we already sort of explained where the numbers came from. They were done in a master plan. So he already went through that while you were sitting there.
And so, I understand where master plans come from.
Right, that's where the numbers come from.
You had some
that's where the numbers come from. The lots that are used in that master plan are not, we think somebody's going to do. They've been approved by a board of supervisors, not necessarily this one, years and years ago. You can't go back to them and go, we want you to pay. That's not allowed under state law. So whatever proffers that were given at the time of the rezoning are the proffers that we can get and collect from them for their development.
Well, it's no different than anything else. Here you have a development. You said it was done 10 years ago. Well, stuff changes. We can't get you that much water. So in order to do this, this has got to change. The contract's got to change.
It doesn't work that way.
Well, it can work that way if you work it out with the developers.
We are controlled by the laws of the state of Virginia.
If you can't get them water, they can't build.
Correct.
And don't put it off on the taxpayer.
But we have to make all opportunities to make water available for
I agree with
those.
That, but not at the bootstraps of the taxpayer.
So just to give you an idea, if 8,500 homes were built, the developer would pay Caroline County $977 million, almost $1 billion.
Okay, for what?
For water to each of those 8,500 homes and sewer.
Okay, 8,500. So you're saying $6,000 or maybe $10,000 hookup fee. That's more or less a hookup fee, boss, is all.
Well, there's also a connection
Another
fee,
connection fee, he's talking availability.
which is on top of that,
When
which
you
is
run
the
a
physical
pipe
work.
from the sewer system over to a brand new house that's been built, it's kind of like when I run electricity to a house. They
We
gotta
don't do
run
that.
wire over there.
We don't do
And then
that.
there's a connection fee after they hook up the wire.
So the connection fee is the physical connection. The developer pays. So in these larger developments, such as that development, they're going to put in all the water and sewer lines from the county's main line.
Okay.
And they'll pay 100% for that and then turn it over to the county to own.
But they didn't invest anything to get the water to them.
Right, which is what the availability fee then goes in,
Million.
which is the 977 million.
This meeting's supposed to end at 8. I've got more. We've got 5 more people who need to speak. You've asked plenty of questions. We'll gladly talk to you after the meeting's over.
Good evening.
My name is Josh Relic. I am from King William County near Aylett. I have a question about sort of the other side of the issue, which is so the water is going to be pumped from the Rappahannock down 301 to Bowling Green area. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this area is Bowling Green area drain into the Mattaponi? Is it?
Yes.
So, Carmel Church. Okay, so, and I know the water is going to get distributed out, but I think it's ultimately going to be used and then going to flow down into the Mattaponi, correct?
So it'll go down Polecat Creek.
Okay. So, yeah, so has there been any studies, and I know it's maybe more difficult because it's further distributed, but has the studies that you've looked at, that you've been doing since 2005, looked at how the water, the
impacts from the water that's returned back to the system, I guess, and how that's discharged?
Yeah.
So short of the work that was done during the permitting and the studies that were done when we expanded our permit to 3 million gallons a day at the wastewater plant that looked at how to get that discharge. So once we go beyond that, then that's going to have to be looked at as well as we look. And, right now the facility is designed to be able to go to 3 to 6 million gallons a day fairly easily.
Okay, so you're saying that when you get the permit for taking the water out, then you're going to, at that point, look at how the water is going to impact the Mattaponi if it was.
So as we increase our weight, go ahead.
If we dig wells,
Mm-hmm.
we can put 3 million down. If we bring well water down to the sewer plant, it's permitted to 3 million gallons a day, well water. So the sewer plant, wherever the water comes from, if we bought it from a neighbor, because we've looked at buying it from Spotsylvania and Hanover, would still discharge in that same stream. So it doesn't matter whether it's coming out of Rappahannock, coming out of a reservoir in Spotsylvania, or coming from the James River. Our sewer plant's located on the Mattaponi watershed. It's already permitted at 3 million with the ability to expand down the road. We already talked about we want to reuse as much of that water as we possibly can so we don't ever really have to exceed 3 million gallons a day. But nobody's studied 7 or 8 million gallons because it's just not there yet. Remember, this water we're getting a permit for something that we may not use that amount of water or build anything for 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
So nobody's studied that side of it yet.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Amber Cromer, Port Royal District. I live on the farm that they say they want to put this plant. Is this going to affect my well? I live there.
It wouldn't affect your well because your well's not affected by the river.
All right, and you said you're going to put it in a barn. I'm sorry, but I like my scenery now. I have a tree line. I have nothing else. I have no neighbors. I would like to keep it that way. I already hear the mines that you've already approved of across the street and the one now that's going to be on my side. I would like to keep my area as rural as possible. I know y'all need to grow, but if I was putting a house somewhere, y'all say, well, you don't have water, you don't build. You know, that's kind of how it goes. I know we have to build our county up, but this is just wrong. This family has had this farm for years. So it's just wrong to put something on there that wasn't there. And I like living back there. I'm right on the river. I have no neighbors. It's nice and quiet, and I'd like to keep it that way. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Put it somewhere else where there's no one living. And I don't want to see a barn there. I mean, I like the tree line. That's where I want to keep it. And I will see it, and I'll probably hear it. And then I'll have cars and trucks up and down all the time my driveway.
No, it'll be one trip a day unless something is broke. Then you'll have a crew there working on whatever's broke. But once it's built, you know, you will have the construction period. But once that's over, it'll be one person a day. There'll be a SCADA system. It's a supervisor control and data acquisition system that'll monitor that and tell us if there's an issue. And then it's once a day somebody will touch it just to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to.
Okay, and you know, you said that I know our property is on that land easement also now, but it is. We have it so we can put another house there. So my son wants to build there. So if my son wants to build right there near where y'all are putting this, I don't think he'll be able to, would he?
Yeah. I mean, this facility is going to be quiet. I mean, it's the building's 8,000 square feet, 6,000 square feet.
That's huge.
Say 6,000 at the most, which is the size of my office. So is that about what the building was?
That's huge. Considering my house is only 821 square feet,
Oh,
that is huge. So, I mean, that would be huge. I mean, that's a lot. And it's just something I don't want to see. My children don't want to see. I made it in the easement to try to keep it as rural as possible. So we don't need this. We really don't.
I would say the style of barn we've chosen is very similar to what you would see, same square footage as you would see in a rural characteristics as you're driving up and down the road.
Yeah.
So size-wise, it wouldn't be a large. It's not like this thing is 3 times the size of a normal barn of that style.
Yeah, but there's never been one there, so I put one there.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Jenkins, how are you?
All right. David Jenkins Jr., Port Royal District. We moved down the county about 36 years ago to get away from development, and apparently we chose the wrong place because it done followed us again. First thing on the financial end, this is what would be considered an enterprise fund, utilities, so to be self-sustaining. What guarantees do we have that the county's not going to have to bail them out again like they did years ago at tune $3 million?
You ought to know there are no guarantees in life.
I know, but
The board's not going to, as I stated this earlier, unless there's a way to financially pay for it, we are trying to get our permit. We have 10 years to show activity on that permit to get the screen in the water, not even build a pump station, just get in the river with our permit. So there's no money to build a whole lot there right now. If the money becomes available and then we can do a revenue bond in the enterprise fund, then the revenue should be there if the bond agencies will lend us the money. So that would be the guarantee, but that's years down the road.
all right. Well, I just want to bring that out. Discussion on salinity. What effect is the withdrawal going to have on existing wells? Because I know from my experience, before we bought the farm, we tested the well in the area at 320 feet. And I've just had water tests done last couple of years, and the sodium level, salinity has risen from being on the upper end of normal to very high. And I'm sure that's infiltration of the river water through the into the aquifer. So what's going to happen down the line with this?
Yeah, thank you. I can take that one. Appreciate the question. So we're not saying salinity is not a concern. We understand that concern. We're simply showing, based on the model that we've done in working with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, that this project would not have a significant effect on salinity levels in the river. What effect would this project overall have on groundwater wells? As you heard, one of the big goals is to preserve those groundwater resources by, between Caroline County and others, minimizing the use of their groundwater. That helps to preserve groundwater for other folks like yourself, and even to help keep salinity at bay from entering the groundwater in the long term. So if anything, this will have a positive effect on your well.
Well, you might as well stay, because next question's going to be in your ballpark too. All right, we're going to, in theory, pull this water out of the river up north of Port Royal, pump it all the way to Carmel Church and treat it. And then if Bowling Green or Port Royal system needs water, it's going to have to build a second pipeline all the way back. Why was the treatment station put in Carmel Church and not, say, on the north side of Bowling Green, so it would minimize the cross pumping?
Would you like to handle that?
Yeah, I'll take care of it.
Okay.
So originally, when we started out, the water plant was going to be located in Port Royal. There's something that we have to deal with, and that's water quality degradation after it's been treated. And as it's moving through that line over the 30-some miles, Hanover has the same issue. They're coming out of Richmond for some of their water coming up. They had a really bad time with chlorine byproducts, and it's something you don't want in your water. And as it sets for a long period of time going through there, it becomes a very hard animal to deal with. So one of the things that we looked at is you got to have a way to be able to treat any of the discharge backwash from the water plant itself. So we needed to be near a place where we wouldn't have to also build a wastewater treatment plant to handle backwash water and things from the plant itself. So now we're close to Carmel Church, so we can go to a wastewater plant, and now we don't have to deal with the primary issue of water quality issues, because your primary water use is along the I-95 corridor, which, that's been designated as the primary growth area to protect the rest of the community and leaving in rural characteristics and being able to take the benefits of that.
Okay, so in theory, if the Port Royal system gets to the point they need water back, we're going to have the same problem with water quality degradation coming back the 30 miles.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's
12
so
miles.
when we were working with King George County, one of the thoughts is that we could send raw water to them, and they could send treated water to us to Port Royal to serve that area in the future as they grew in Port Royal. So that was kind of the discussion with King George at the time. That's still something in the future. It would be far greater to do that. The expense of operating a water treatment facility, so you could put another plant down in that area, but it's very expensive to operate water treatment facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Your biggest expense is your debt service on building it, then your employees, electric and chemicals are neck and neck. So it's very costly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd just add, I wouldn't have any concerns about the quality of the water at that location. The water needs to be regularly tested every day to make sure it meets the limits that we have in the state and in this country for water quality to protect public health. So we'd have no concerns about the ability of that water to meet those standards, and it would be regularly monitored to make sure that it does.
Okay. All right, last thing, pump station. Why do we have that much above ground? Because basically, you're setting a screen in the roof, you're connecting it to a 100-foot deep well inside the building, and you're dropping pumps there. So basically, water coming in through the screen is just moving in by negative draw because you're taking the water out of the well. It's not a suction. Why can't we just build it flat roof, below ground level even? You got 100 feet to play with.
So I'll actually let Roger answer that, but below grade does not work just because of confined space issues that we have and trying to meet those. Anytime there's places where human has to go below grade creates a lot of issues. So
we try not multiple exits, you're not in confined space.
Yeah, it's still below grade. There's a bunch of issues with that, but as far as the design of the building and what needs to be in that building, I'll let Roger kind of talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, the above grade portion would simply be a building to provide access to the facility, to the pumps, to other equipment installed in that building, allowing any equipment to be moved in and out of the facility as needed in the future. As Joey talked a little bit about the ability to monitor and control this facility from the county's offices, and so there'd be space there available for that, and that's all best suited to be above grade.
I assume you're aiming at multiple pumps to get your GPM level up?
That's correct.
And what size main are you looking at to call
30-inch line.
30-inch. All right.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Collins?
You know me by name. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Kevin Collins, Reedy Church District. Why'd the county wait 15 years to hold a public meeting on this if we've been in work since 2004?
We've had public hearings, we've had work sessions. I mean, we've spent quite a bit of time in work sessions with the county.
I mean, I was just basically going off of the timeline here. The first public meeting shows up October 2019. Right around the same time, the county got involved talking with Amazon and some of these bigger data center projects.
So the county actually, we had work sessions prior to that with the board that were open to the public that talked about, first it started off every time we do our water master plan, how are we looking to provide water and where are we going? And then it turned into the actual project itself before the board asking for funding. And then we actually did individual work sessions where it was strictly a water work session to discuss water. Some of them were also water and wastewater work sessions and given updates on this project along the way.
Okay, while you're talking about wastewater, what's the amount currently being discharged in Polecat Creek? 700,000 gallons a day, roughly?
About 500,000 is our average.
Okay. With the increase in demand that you spoke of, what is the limit on the discharge for Polecat Creek currently?
So 3 million gallons a day.
3 million gallons a day.
So that's the permit. The plant can only treat 1.5. So we've got another train that we would add, but we can discharge 3 million.
Okay. So are there plans in place to upgrade that capacity, being that we're going to have all this new water usage and discharge?
So there is a plan. We've already got the permit for 3. So we built, you build infrastructure kind of as you need it. So you don't want to go in and just put in 3 million gallons. We've been there for 11 years now. That equipment would have just sat there and rotted.
Oh,
so yeah, it's built in so we can do it in phases.
And then what's the impact going to be on Polecat Creek with the increased discharge above and beyond for the landowners downstream? Is there any impact when you hit that 3 million and we need to start applying for more?
So 3 million gallons a day right now, the impact has been minimal. We actually discharge to it's considered the swamp areas where we actually do. So we're not directly in the stream right now.
So we have discharged up to 3 million gallons in a day?
No, I'm saying we've got a discharge that can do that. So those studies were done when we got those permits.
Up to 3 million?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does the county have enough water supply right now for what's currently on the books and approved to be built in the county?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Mr. Culley, you stated that Spotsylvania County is going to be providing the water for the Amazon Mattamy project?
That's correct.
Do you have a signed copy of the agreement between Spotsylvania County and Caroline for that?
I do not, and there's no permit that could be issued for any data center at Mattamy without a water agreement from Spotsylvania.
Okay, but the land's already been rezoned.
Yes, with
Okay.
the water listed coming from Spotsylvania, it's not a responsibility of Caroline.
And that's in writing that Caroline won't be on the hook for water if they decide Spotsylvania can't supply it. Then they just don't do anything with their property.
Unless they negotiate with us to do something. There is no requirement for the county to provide any water, wastewater, or
Well, there's
reused
also
water.
no agreement for Spotsylvania to provide them water at this point.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Last one here. You spoke of the county is not in the business of buying land,
Of owning property.
owning property. I see a lot of county-owned property all across the county. I know you're not in the business of owning property, but it seems like the planning department for Caroline is in the business of selling property to data centers and industry when we don't have the water available for these. I really think there needs to be a moratorium on any of these new major projects that are being approved until we have a permit in hand that says we are going to get the water. It's time to start putting the residents and the people who are already here in Caroline ahead of the people who haven't built yet. You talk of 10,000 homes in Carmel Church. That was rezoned 14 years ago? Before your time. Not one stick of timber has been taken off of any of that land to build anything or do anything with. Yet our Board of Supervisors is currently entertaining the idea of giving this same person 1,000 more acres for a data center on the banks of the North Anna River. It's preposterous. Yeah. So when you stand up here and you say that, you know, all this is to help the residents and make sure we have enough water for everybody, it just sounds to me like we're trying to suffice these big data centers to be able to come in and give us some of that money that they're dangling in front of us. I just saw an update from one of the Board of Supervisor members tonight that there's 5 more data center projects being proposed in the county. 2 currently applied for and 5 more additional. One's already been approved. So when you ask, what's the county hiding? What are we looking for? Those are the questions that need to be asked, because when we've got wells going dry for residential customers and we have Board of Supervisor members that are approving 600 additional homes in Belmont, we don't have water for them. More homes in Pendleton, we don't have water for them. A 900-acre data center in the middle of rural preservation on the North Anna River, we don't have water for that. None of it. Yeah, it is. It's my tough luck because I had to spend 15 grand to drill my well. And now we're talking, again, I understand the county needs water. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They are denying permits for new wells in Caroline currently. They are not permitting in certain areas to build or even drill a well. I know people personally that are on their second well on a property to try and get water. It needs to happen, but to plan something for...
Is that for irrigating?
What's that?
For irrigating?
What
that they're not issuing permits for second wells? Yeah, it's a state well. I'm just curious.
That's a health department. It's not something the county does.
Yeah, you have to talk to the health department for that, for any sort of well and septic. But I mean, it's crazy that we're having a meeting right now to discuss this, and it turned into data centers. This is about a water supply for the county.
Correct.
And it should be focused on being a water supply for the county. We're running out of water, folks. We need water. It's going to need to be taken from somewhere. But to plan something for 20 years and not even have somewhere to drop the hose in the river, I mean, that's the first spot I would have looked for when I started doing all of these studies and plans and permits. I get it. We're not in the
Mr.
process.
Collins, this is for us to answer questions, not to give you a podium to speak. So I appreciate it. But yes, sir. Thank you.
Questions are over.
The usage chart did say that 66% industrial use.
No.
Commercial, industrial. It's
They said 33%, 23% commercial.
industrial, the same thing. Split hairs.
So again, we have all
No,
of this.
because right now, if you look at the percentage of water that's used, the majority of our water actually goes to commercial. We don't have a single data center, but that's for
We don't have enough water.
you.
Maybe slow your roll.
Right, but you buy groceries. You fill your fuel, your car full of fuel, so you got.
Also pay taxes.
I understand, but those are services, so those go to those type of things when you go get your hair cut at the barber shop, and you know they're in those type of places. And I'm with you. I understand. Anyone else would like to speak?
Can I just a few more questions? It'll be quick. Can we 5 minutes?
So well, let me ask you this: is this something you need to ask in front of everybody, or is this something we can talk offline? Because if you've got questions.
I would like to ask one.
I have one question.
Yeah. Jerry Dickinson, not a voting resident in Caroline, business owner, pay plenty in taxes. I just want to contextualize this a little bit. How did we get here where the most cost efficient thing was to take water from the far side of the county and pipe it all the way over here? There's no other options. The North Anna River, which borders Caroline. How did Hanover end up with all that? They got it first.
Yep.
So this is a result of piss poor planning.
We couldn't.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. I'm just contextualizing. I didn't blame you. I'm just asking.
That is why it's important for us to get a straw in the river somewhere. Or
Right,
we lose
right.
the applicability to get
Right. So, all right. So we're going to pay on the other side of the county for your poor planning, or the previous, county administrators, supervisors, poor planning. Right now, we got enough water for what we already had before this 8,500 home subdivision. You all keep referencing that subdivision.
That's the one.
All right,
Yeah,
yes.
Pendleton's approved for 3,600, Ladysmith Village 3,000.
Okay.
and that
So we
not-
keep
not
we
the-
keep approving this zoning for
again,
these
years ago,
subdivisions.
in the 2000s.
All right, but most recently, we just had an approval of an 8,500.
No.
The one behind the Flying J, wasn't
14
it?
years ago. 14
14 years ago? Okay, okay.
The only recent approval has been an addition, and it was already approved. They changed the proffers, but the lots could have already been built. So there's not been any added new lots to anything on the books other than all the ones that are already piled up.
But we're not building on those because we don't have the water.
They're not building on those because the developers have not determined whether they can put the infrastructure in the ground and make money selling the home.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We don't
Not
have the
because of
water for those
No,
homes.
we would work to get the water for those homes.
Okay, but we don't have the current water supply for those homes. If they built them all tonight, we wouldn't have the water for them, right?
We have some.
Yeah, we've got about 500,000 gallons of additional capacity of raw water. We got 2 new wells that we're
Is that enough to
constructing a
support
green
all
sand
these,
filter.
places?
Not all of them.
So, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. You're going to grow in stages. So to go out and invest a lot of money just to build everything all at once, we couldn't afford it as citizens,
Well,
and you wouldn't want to
understand
pay for it. So
that.
we
I
got
understand
to phase it in and cycle it in.
Yeah, we got to phase it in. So
It takes most of those developers at least a year to put the infrastructure in the ground, the roads
I
and all that
understand
stuff.
what infrastructure takes.
So
Yeah.
nobody's gonna build one overnight.
No, I know that. I'm well aware of that. And that's not really the question I asked. The question was, did we have the water to support them if they were here?
No.
All right. No, thank you. That's what I was asking.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right, real quick. And I just want to say, I appreciate you guys are not the Board of Supervisors, and we're asking a lot of questions and making statements that probably they need to hear from us. So thanks for. So other than clearly there's the pump station, however that happens, that land is required that the county needs, right? So for the rest of this project that is currently planned, are there any other pieces of land in a similar situation where the county will need to acquire either rights or the actual property, part of the property from a private citizen?
Yeah, we've got 35 miles of water line that we've got to construct in easements along the way, and we'll have to work with landowners through all of that.
Okay. Is the plan that these pipes are going to be, I know they're going to be underground at the river. Are they going to be underground everywhere? Okay. To and from the treatment? Okay.
They have 3.5 foot of cover minimum over top of all the infrastructure.
So a similar question, last question, about the water needs and how often you update that. So the cost, the projected cost of the project, when was that last updated? Is that in dollars from the point that you see this happening, or is that today's dollars, yesterday's dollars?
So today's dollars are around 200 million.
Okay.
And prior to inflation, that was 95.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would like to thank everyone for coming out. Hopefully this has been somewhat beneficial to understand what's been going on, what we've been doing. There's a lot of information, a lot of studies that have been done over the years to get to even to this point. And again, the idea of this meeting wasn't required as any part of our permitting. We wanted to make sure, because we started hearing people because the permits drug on. We thought we'd have this permit 2.5 years ago or so. Honestly, this project was thought of, and everything has not changed other than the allocation from King George that had anything to do, even a thought of a data center. So even though people say that this is what started and why we're here today, it's not. That's That is something that has come on. There's something called fiber latency, that fiber optic can't send information, but so far Caroline County wasn't even on the map to even think about here, and until, what's that?
It wasn't even on the map in 19.
Yeah, that fiber latency wasn't even, that animal wasn't tackled even in 2019. I mean, that's a new technology that they're able to go 60 some miles now instead of 30. So that's a new technology. That's why Spotsylvania, King George, and Caroline, they're looking at us because they're able to build instead of building on top of people on bigger lands, and they're looking at us. But this was all been done at this point. And up until King George, we were told 6 months ago, King George couldn't be part of our project. None of this water was dedicated for cooling at all. So, but thank you. If there's any other questions, I'll be glad to answer questions from people. I'll stay around this evening until all the questions are answered. Just appreciate everyone's time. And we will be putting out a quick press release as well tomorrow, just kind of to give it an update. But read the fact sheet. It does cover a lot of information. I think those are probably 80% of the questions that we hear on a regular basis are on those fact sheets. So we were trying to make sure that we gave you the good information because there's all kinds of information that's not exactly accurate, and we're trying to give you the best information that we've gotten that we know. So thank you for your night. Please be safe going home, and I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.